Might as well get started. So I'll call the meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Clean Water Advisory Committee on October 20th, 2021, under the suspension rules of the Governor of Massachusetts to conduct Zoom meetings. I guess we're supposed to say this now every time we meet. Anyway, with that, we only have one agenda item tonight. I am thrilled, Scott, that we have a report to begin discussing. And I think it's an outstanding report. What I thought I'd do is just, I kind of think it makes some sense to go through, each person's sort of editorial questions and so on. So Richard, I thought I'd just start with you since you're the easiest one to probably handle in terms of your comments. But why don't you go ahead? I did see your comment about.
So I had two comments.
Yeah.
One was about the order in which the discussion about controllable versus non-controllable nitrogen was presented. I found it confusing that there was a layout of the list. It looks like, Scott, you may have changed that in your latest draft.
I remember seeing that comment, Richard, and frankly, I was pushing to get this in, and I'm not sure I got to that one or not, but I can certainly.
But it looks. I read that section, and it looks better to me.
Okay, I did make some edits in there, but I'll double check that.
Yeah, I think now you start off with a brief discussion about controllable versus non-controllable, and then you get a list, and then you go back to the percentages between controllable and non-controllable. And I think that's fine. It struck me reading it that it is a bit out of order. Okay. And then the other one was the chart. I think it was figure 19, which shows the percentages needed, the percentages of households that would need to be converted depending upon whether you can achieve 5, 8, or 11. And some of them are over 100%. You look at it, and my first thought is, well, how do you get more than 100%? But what you're really saying is that it won't work because you can't get more than 100%. But it just, to me, it's a good graph, but it's a hard graph. And I think somebody I don't feel like I'm an expert by any stretch, but at least I've been listening to you for months now, so I know something. I just thought it was a tough graph to get my hands around. And I think it'd be hard for somebody else who's not familiar with it to understand the point you're trying to make.
That's a good comment. And I'll be honest, I struggled with that as the best way to present it. I mean, it made sense to me sort of in the depth of doing all the calculations, and you're exactly right. What I was trying to do was a question that Brian Dudley asked, are there enough systems there that can be converted to meet the targets? And the only way I could figure how to do that was on the percentage basis. And you're right, if it goes over 100%, that means it probably won't work. And as I recall, the scenario that has that is the 11 milligrams at build out. Maybe there's a better way to present it. Yep.
Maybe the change of color once it gets over 100%.
Oh, okay.
And then you can have an explanation for, the color code changes once you reach 100% because there aren't enough for the, conversions.
I like that idea. I can add a footnote and try to explain what that means when you exceed the 100%. Right. And I'm just looking for that figure right now to make sure I get the right one. You think it was figure 19?
I thought so, but I had it in my email.
I put some things in the appendix, and I did I renumbered things too since you gave me a comment. So I think it ended up in the appendix where I calculate the percentages. Just quickly looking at it now. Let's see. Yeah. So figure.
I thought it was still there in the text in the body.
Is it? It might be. But I did renumber figures. So I'll have to go back and see which one it is you're talking about. But I can do that later. But I like your suggestion, and you're absolutely right. It is kind of a tricky thing to explain, and so there probably is a better way to do it.
I'll take a look, and if I can find it, I'll text
Okay.
what the number is.
All right, all right. Yeah, it might, I think, I know I did renumber figures after all the comments, so that for sure, it may not be 19. I'm looking at what 19 is now, and it's something
Okay.
different.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's now, it's on page 35 and it's figure 22, sensitivity analysis.
Okay, let me just go to that quick. Oh, it's at the graph, yeah. 30, oh, right, right. Yeah, that sounds right. Let's see. What page did you say, Kurt?
35.
35.
And what you had was you had the 100% bar in there, so you can see if something's over 100%.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. I see it. There it is. Yep, figure 22.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
Guys, I'm not
This-
following. Is there a new version of this plan that you sent out?
well,
was
I,
the-
no, the one I sent out yesterday is the one we're referring to now, but I had sent an earlier rough draft where the figures were different. Figure numbering was different.
Yeah, so Fred, if you, in the email that I sent out yesterday, that Ryan also, and Ryan
Ryan
replied
attached
this
it.
morning. Ryan replied this morning, and that has the version we're working with.
Oh, okay.
So there's either an embedded one that Ryan sent back, it's a PDF, or there's a link at the bottom of that email, so you can just click on it on the internet, either one.
Okay. Let me
You
go.
find it?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, perfect.
I had the one that I commented on the desktop.
Yeah, yeah, so anyway, we'll go through this one since this is the latest iteration. I did have a comment on controllable, and I think what we should do there, Scott, is not use the word controllable, but use anthropogenic.
Yeah,
and-
I remember you gave me that comment before, Kurt. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Let me let you finish. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, controllable is subjective, and anthropogenic is literally the accurate description of the
Yeah,
source.
the reason I'm going with those terms is, as you know, that's the way it's discussed at MEP, and those are the terms that DEP uses as well. I agree with you. They're a little awkward, but I'm just trying to be consistent with what, and DEP, as you know, really does regard the MEP report as the authoritative analysis. So we could change it, but I'd just be concerned with, how it may disrupt the MEP and DEP people.
Maybe you could have a footnote to it. In other words, use the DEP language, but then footnote it saying.
Yeah, we
this
could
is-
do that. We could do that. I think
Amongst
that's
people
okay.
that are literate, this is often referred to as.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, the scientific term is anthropogenic.
Yeah.
And controllable is pejorative because it assumes, to me, and the reason that I'm reacting to it is I think it assumes these are the only things that you can control. And obviously you can control the amount of salt marsh that you restore. You can control the amount of permeable reactive barrier that you build. You can control the population. You have influence over the population of shellfish by virtue of your regulations and or growth targets, like we want to maintain X amount. There's an awful lot of natural system components that are controllable as well.
Right. Yeah, Kurt, I'm also thinking that the other distinction with controllable and anthropogenic, the precipitation inputs, which, as I've stated in the report, are pretty darn significant, and it's worth remembering that. I mean, those are largely anthropogenic, but they're considered non-controllable because they're not local. So I think the distinction that MEP had proposed was not whether or not it was human induced, but whether it was something the town would have an opportunity to manage. So I think you're right, but I think there is somewhat more of a distinction or a different distinction that I think they might be making. But I can wordsmith that for sure.
Okay.
You
And I
actually
think-
have it in the report now. In
Yeah, and-
section
and,
3 on page 6.
Yeah.
You have it
I
so-called
thought-
controllable or anthropogenic nitrogen.
Yeah, I thought I put something in there relative, because you did give me that comment before, so I think I did do something.
Okay.
Yep.
All
Oh, yeah,
right.
there it is right there. Right, orthopedic. Yep, yep.
Did you have anything else, Richard?
No, that was it. I mean, I had a lot of minor things, like there are places where you end a sentence, you don't have a space between that and the next word, but it doesn't make sense to go through all of the report, I don't think yet, to do that, although I'm willing to it at some point.
Yeah, no, that would be helpful.
Okay.
What I'd suggest, Richard, is if you have those kind of editorials, just shoot them to Scott.
You don't need to know about them?
No, I think, no, seriously, I think if we, just to be efficient, I think if we get things to Scott at this stage of the game, especially on, grammar, punctuation, that sort of thing, it's going to be a lot quicker for him to get, a next iteration of this, a cleaned up version. I think if there's policy considerations or, big, what I guess what we'd call deliberative sort of issues, things that, people may or may not agree with, we should probably talk about them, but that I'm hoping is what we can accomplish at least tonight, is to, get the big stuff out on the table. If there's some things that still need resolution, we'll have to, continue those obviously, but if we can at least kind of get to most of these comments and get them incorporated, that would be great, because, Board of Selectmen wants to get going on this, and obviously we want to have as we're likely to get a lot of comments. I hope we'll get a lot of comments from the committee members. The report, the distribution list that I sent it to, I don't know if everybody was clear about that list, but that was basically all of the major committees in town and all of the department heads. So DPW, conservation, obviously Hillary, the assistant town administrator, the town administrator, and then boards like Zoning Board of Appeals, the Board of Health, Conservation Commission itself, Planning Board, Board of Water Commissioners, Open Space, Wellfleet Conservation Trust. I may not have them all at the top of my head, but we, I basically tried to send it to everybody. The Marine Advisory, Dredge Task Force, everybody that's got a stake in, water quality in Wellfleet and or potentially a role in this plan got copied with this report. With an ask to, for each of those department heads or committee chairs to send it to their, respective stakeholders. So it got a big distribution, Scott.
Good. And you're going to post it on the town website as well, Kurt?
Yeah, I thought, I'll make sure that, I'll have a conversation with Rebecca tomorrow to make sure that happens. She was on the email where we were talking about it, trying to get it posted ASAP, but I'll just circle back with her to make sure that happens. So with that, Fred, do you want to kind of go through your comments?
First up, it looks like this version that you just sent has a lot of the sections all fleshed out that weren't fleshed out before. Am I getting that right, Scott?
Yeah, that is right. Yep. There's quite a bit that got added there. And so, yeah, you'll see some differences, Fred.
Okay, so let me just get over here and get over here and just look at my comments, okay?
So I think the first one was page 4, paragraph 2. If this plan is accepted, will it meet the Commonwealth's requirements?
Yeah, well, the first question, well, I talk about a lot about foreshadowing things because I'm kind of thinking to myself, in a comprehensive planning effort, we're basically saying, hey guys, there are plenty of plans that this would mesh nicely with. And it would be nice to have those plans to go off of, or if those plans go off of this. So for example, a clean, I think I used the first time I talked about, well, I'm sorry. let's go to, if you put something in there about the, something about there was a section that you added on that it wasn't there before about the 208 plan.
Consistency with 208, that's
Yeah,
towards the
so
end.
in other words, my point in all of this is like, we get this plan accepted and then does DEP, MEP, whoever, say, yep, you've got a 208 plan, you're good to go, live long and prosper.
Yeah, well, we actually need two approvals. We need DEP to sign off on it, and then we need the commission to agree on the consistency. And as you know, I've been trying to work as closely with both of those organizations as possible. So I think I'm pretty confident on certainly the Cape Cod Commission consistency. And I think the comment we've been hearing over and over from DEP is they want the backup plan in the report. So once GHD finishes their work, we can add that, and hopefully that will satisfy their concern on that end.
And then we'll get the what is it? What kind of permit are we getting now?
Well, the goal is to get a watershed permit.
Mhm.
And I've modeled this report after the Pleasant Bay report. It's structured very similar to the Pleasant Bay report, and I've been using that as a template. That's the only one that's been completed and permitted. And Mass DEP was going to develop regulations for watershed permits, but they haven't done that yet. So we really don't have anything to go by other than the one permit that's been issued, and then obviously the meetings that we've had with DEP in terms of guidance. And they've been very helpful. They've been certainly pointing us in the right direction. As I say, I think the big thing that we need to add is the so-called backup plan. And we have, as you know, we have the transfer station work squared away, thanks to the work GHD did. And now they want to see a collection system layout, which is being done right now.
And
I
Fred,
think your new section 1 sets out that what the purpose is pretty clearly. And this, the section 1, I think, is new, isn't it? Or partly new? When you talk about the watershed management plan, the targeted watershed management plan, and the Cape Cod Commission's 208 plan.
Yep. Yeah, I think I added a few things there.
You might want to make more, highlight more those two as being the real targets of this whole process.
Okay.
So the other thing, I mean, mostly what I saw here, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, is that throughout this, when we're talking about this, I mean, I'd like some things. I mean, I don't know if it's a good idea to be a tickler of like, okay, for example, in the intro, should we, or maybe in next steps, do we say things like, these are some other plans that we really should be integrating with we really don't have, or these are plans that that are that so for example, if we had a business plan for the town, and I don't know if we do or we don't, but you're going to read that a lot.
The closest thing, Fred, to something like that would be the comprehensive, the local comprehensive plan update.
Yeah, and so the comprehensive plan, I mean, I see one of the biggest challenges for Wellfleet is, okay, we're losing businesses. We have empty storefronts. How are we gonna? I mean, COVID showed us that we have the ability to enhance what goes on in Wellfleet, for a more year-round population. So how do we do that? Well, if you bring in the infrastructure, they will come. It's sort of like you build the field, they will come. But without that infrastructure, the downtown is going to slowly. Like I just remember the Lighthouse restaurant. Every 10 years, they dig a hole, pour $100,000 in it, and cover it up or more. And eventually that restaurant basically went out of business because it just couldn't handle. There's a lot of different reasons, but one of the reasons was they had to do another septic system. So I don't know if all of this foreshadowing here is a good, bad, or different. Whether it's valuable to the plan, but I mean, like as a readable plan, as something that would tweak my interest, thinking about, oh yeah, wouldn't that be great if we had, some kind of wastewater, even if it was a centralized wastewater system that didn't, we put the leaching fields under the parking lots, for example, and thereby, we have created a cluster system for downtown Wellfleet. That might be something that, tweaks people's, yeah, that's something we really need, and it would be good for the economy of Wellfleet. Similarly, like the Lawrence Road project, we've gotten the money for it, right? We're going to set it up. The additional monies, they're going to create this big cluster system for the new Lawrence Road, for the town buildings out there. But also, I'm kind of thinking, well, then you've got this neighborhood around them. What incentives are we going to give these people to hook up?
Well, I think those are great questions, Fred. But I think they're a little bit beyond the scope of, of a targeted watershed management plan. They're important, no doubt. But the main purpose of this is simply to show a process to be able to comply with, nitrogen mitigation targets. So we can't really, we're not really tasked with a business plan for Wellfleet. With respect to the neighborhoods, clearly they're identified as a nitrogen reduction opportunity with regard to the 95 Lawrence Road project. I think if committee members have, if you have suggestions on incentives or ideas, we certainly should talk about them, and maybe there's a way to get them in the report.
We already talked about the incentives for the INA systems in this report.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't think we have talked about, what we would do to get the neighborhood connected. And I think it's a valid observation.
Kurt, if I may, one of the comments that Tim Passakarnis made at the last select board meeting is that I need to add a section on financing, which is not here yet. And that might go to some of this discussion about, what are the options to either incentivize or pay for either connections to the sewer or the INA implementation. That's something we have talked a little bit about, but no decisions on that yet. So it's something we're going to have to, the town's going to have to explore. And that really will be up to the town in terms of how this thing gets financed and cost shared. That's really more of a, was a management decision on the part of the town as to who pays for this and how. I will certainly lay out the options in that financing section, which I have started working on. But I wanted to get a report in your hands before the next meeing.
Yeah.
So keep working on it.
Fred, with regard to the downtown thing, the lighthouse, what's included in this, and I thought Scott did a pretty good job of it, was basically laying out areas where there's opportunities for cluster. The GHD folks are going to look at opportunities for cluster development as they go through and put together their sewer layout plan. That is, I think that's one of the tasks in their scope of services. But I think in answer to your question, though, it's going to be opportunistic. I mean, if there's a real problem, if there's a real anchor, there's a real driver, the plan allows for and certainly supports a number of tools in the toolkit to try to address anybody's particular problem. So, whether it's a cluster, whether it's an enhanced IA, or whether it's central sewer, all of those options are here. And then it would just be a matter for administration to be looking at where does this fit and how should we proceed and what should we recommend to the town.
That goes back to one of my original comments about the fact that when you write a plan, you've got to maintain the plan, you've got to employ the plan, and you've got to, adjust it as needed. Okay. And, as more data comes in, you say, okay, this works, this doesn't, therefore we're adjusting our plan. So I thought that was an important thing to put in there is that, here's our plan. We're going to go forward with this plan. There are projects that are in this plan that we are going forward with. Okay. There are projects in this plan that are an option, that we may want to seriously look at. Like I said, cluster, some kind of wastewater cluster program for the downtown, but I think it's important to kind of, just kind of say, these are some of the other things that we could integrate with. So you have a bills in the business plan, businesses need infrastructure. Similarly for like the climate change plan for the town. I know nobody's even thinking about this, but I'm like basically saying, all right, well, one of the things that we looked at, one of the technologies we looked at was that bulkhead system. You want to, if the town supported a bulkhead system for Commercial Street, and that's a multi-million-dollar bulkhead along a lot of private property and business property, but it would be good for the private property, good for and it kind of goes with a clean, I mean, in the world I lived in, it was about retreat, but everybody realized retreat was a long-term, when you get to climate change and rising waters, that retreat is is the end goal. But in the meantime, for like the next 50 years, you may want to get into protection. And protection would be a nice big bulkhead along Commercial Street.
Right, but again, Fred, not to interrupt you, but I don't think that's within the scope of a nitrogen mitigation strategy. I mean, it's very important, but.
The thing is that it is in one way, because you put that bulkhead in, and all of a sudden we have a nitrogen mitigation. As the bulkhead does two things.
Yeah, I think that's right. And that's one of the reasons I've been attracted to that technology option, the Long Island bulkhead approach, because that's exactly what they're doing down there. I had a call last week with them, and they're finding that that's a very cost-effective way to do this, because as they spend money doing shoreline stabilization and whatnot, they're incorporating the treatment at the same time. We haven't done this on the Cape anywhere, so this is a brand new idea, but I put it in here for something to talk about, think about, and then when we do the pilot project, that's something that can be evaluated further as an option.
One of the few places, Fred, where I think that would immediately apply would be something like the Blash House, where you have, because that's more like what Long Island's doing, where you've got an erosion exposure. But that house is nitrogen, contribution goes into Cape Cod Bay, so it's not within our watershed. It's not within the Wellfleet Harbor watershed.
Not our problem, man. Not our
problem, man. And we don't have. I mean, we've got a lot of armored stuff, and I think it was a great observation on, on Ryan's part and Scott's part to, make sure that's a feature here. It's an option that, but I think it's opportunistic. It's hard for me to imagine, spending. It's like $300. $300. I can't remember the numbers now. It's like $300 a foot to build a bulkhead.
I think you might put another zero on that.
Yeah, is it 300,000? No. Anyway, it's a lot of money. And so when you're looking at the numbers that are involved there, that's where an enhanced IA system probably makes more sense for that individual property, because it's a lot cheaper.
No, I get it. I mean, I'm just pointing out, like, there's a lot of things that this would spark, if you really wanted to get this town excited, which it desperately needs, it gets excited and gets professionalized in some ways. Don't get me wrong, I know how hard that is. These are some of the things that we should start to be thinking about, The other thing I was looking at too was like, we never really, I thought one of the biggest incentives that we could kind of like leave on the table was that extra bedroom incentive, because after we take all the other incentives away, that extra bedroom incentive still remains. And it could, you know,
That seemed pretty controversial when we met with some of the other boards, though. I think we have to be a little concerned that we don't put in items that might draw disparaging comments about the plan in general. And it seemed to me that when we talked about the INA systems, there was some pushback by by people in terms of what incentives beyond the monetary incentive should be offered. You know, and the additional bedroom, it's a little bit like you're saying, okay, we're going to give you incentive because we want to get less nitrogen into the ground, but adding a bedroom is going to put more nitrogen into the ground.
well, not if you have an INA system.
Well, another bedroom is going to mean more people, even if you have an INA. I mean, it's not going to be more than it was before, but it's going to be more than if you just put an enhanced INA system in.
I understand your point here. I was just thinking that, okay, guys, we have a kind of a sunsetting incentive system with this 12,000, maybe goes down to 5, and it goes away. So what's our incentive to say to people, unless the state or the town adopts only INA systems in this town, right? What is our incentive, right, to say, okay, after we, you know, these monetary incentives sunset, what is our remaining incentive to get people to say, well, crap, if I spend another 10,000, I can put in, I can have an extra bedroom.
Go ahead, John. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I want to say, once again, the point that was just made, I want to re-emphasize, if you bring this incentive with an extra bedroom, you're throwing the whole project into question. We don't want to do that. We want to move forward. So let's not add things that may be a distraction. If we're asking what the incentive is, in a certain sense, we can fall back on exactly the same incentive that went into play back when they put the requirement in that all new construction or sale of a house, the septic system had to be upgraded to Title V. So in a certain sense, we are saying that cesspools are by definition failed systems. You have to bring in an IA system. I'm not worried about the incentives. I'm worried that we not get bogged, we not throw stuff into this plan that's going to sabotage the plan. I want the plan to be clean so that we can move forward, because I think everybody on the committee agrees we need to move forward somewhat expeditiously, because, you know, the longer we wait, the worse our problem is going to become.
Well, it's also, you know, we strike with why the is hot. The last thing I had was about the TDRs. The TDR.
As for development rights, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this actually goes to what John just said, right? You know, you talk about TDRs in open space, right? And I kind of go, all right, this might be a sensitive thing, because I know from my perspective, I've got a nice big piece of land, right? I say, you know what? I have a nice house on this nice big piece of land, and now, and I'm not going to develop any more of it. I'm going to give this over to the town. Therefore, reducing my tax burden. I still have the access to the land because it'll be open space. It's around my house, so I have the illusion of the same amount of land as I always had, even though I didn't. And in return, the town gets you can just basically leave it open space. It can't be developed. You know, my question is somebody going to turn around, and I don't want it to sabotage the plan, like you say, and say, well, wait a minute, is that a fair trade? You know, I think you're just making people that, you know, I mean, you're basically making the town's going to buy that land. You lose the tax base, and what do we get out of it? We don't get much except some open space, you know, that won't be developed and therefore won't be a nitrogen load. I don't know if that's a good trade. you know?
Hmm.
I mean, that might be just me who looked at that and went, wait a minute, that might jump out at something. Maybe I'm just being overly dramatic or something.
The only reason
Is-
oh, go ahead, John.
Yeah, the history is that the town has historically supported open spaces, supported the use of revenue for open spaces. There's been a strong commitment for the town toward open spaces. I don't think this is a problem. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I
And
don't-
like I said, this could just be me, but I am watching all of this conversation land grow up around established homes by people who are basically just got paid a huge amount of money for their land, and on top of it, excuse me a second, guys.
Yeah, they still get to use it.
Maybe
That is the
the
history
section
of
was just
of
pretty
the
small to
National
begin with.
Seashore.
The thing that I mean, Scott, I like it. I think it's great because basically all it's really doing is operating as a placeholder to take advantage to the extent that we can of credits that would be associated with that through ongoing efforts by the Conservation Trust and the Open Space Committee anyway.
Yeah.
So with regard to the equity arguments that you're raising, Fred, they're, open, let open space and, the trust, deal with those. I mean, they're buying the land, they're creating the open space. And as John said, as John alluded to, obviously the seashore creates a big reservoir for us, but I mean, I just thought it was I think it's a nice thing to have in there because it recognizes something that the town of Wellfleet's doing that does have a nitrogen mitigation benefit. And,
Oh, no, I don't disagree, guys. I just kind of like, we were just talking about, red herrings in land, for lack of a better.
The reason that I put it in is when I did the calculations, comparing the 2035, 30-year growth plan versus the full build out, the 2035 looks pretty doable. I mean, the numbers aren't so bad, especially if the town starts, maybe reducing the number of Title V's going in. But build out becomes challenging. And of course, the zoning was set up in every town way before any watershed understanding was put in place. So it's not surprising that there's a conflict. I think it happens pretty commonly. So both the open space recommendation and the TDR are, opportunities for the town to change that build out to some degree.
No, I get it.
And,
I get it.
yeah.
I totally get
So
it.
it is an option. I mean, the other option
Is
is
it-
let the growth happen and then pay for whatever you need to do to accommodate it. Those are all valid approaches, but it's the nice thing is the town at least has the awareness that there are some options at this point.
And the other thing, Fred, is it's about the most expensive option that would be considered. I mean, you get very little nitrogen reduction for millions and millions in cost.
Well, in other words, there is no nitrogen reduction because all you're doing is protecting that land from being developed.
You're preventing
Yeah,
it from
preventing-
increase, right?
Yeah, you're preventing an increase in load.
Yeah.
So anyway, no, I think it's a good thing to put in there. And I think as John said, it's not really controversial, I don't think.
Yeah,
You
well,
can
I
take
just
out
wanted to
one
bring-
line that might be controversial, which is the density bonuses. I mean, again, you're talking about in the section itself, it's on page 39, and it's only 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, the transfer of development rights has to be sort of a voluntary thing for landowners. So generally speaking, the places that have been successful have provided some sort of incentive or bonus to the landowners to do the
Well,
deal. And the
I'm
most
not
common is
disagreeing-
some sort of, yeah.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying we don't need to put it in writing in this plan. It's sort of like maybe we will give somebody an extra bedroom somewhere down the road, but it's a
Yeah.
controversial topic. It's potentially controversial. So we
Right.
can say the TDRs are a possibility without fleshing out all the details. And that would
Exactly.
remove, I think, the red herring part of it.
Exactly. Yeah, I think.
Good suggestion. Very good suggestion.
Yep. The
Yeah,
other
that's a
thing-
good compromise.
You raised another interesting point, Fred, earlier when you're talking about what happens with incentives for, enhanced IA or advanced septic or whatever we're going to call it.
As they sunset.
Yeah, well, what Scott and I had talked about, which I wanted to, make everybody aware of, is we were kicking that exact question around like a week or two ago. And it occurred to me that this is kind of like the stretch building code, if you really think about it. Like when they went from 4-inch studs to 6-inch studs, when they went from, an R12 to an R21 requirement in walls for insulation, when they went to, hurricane tie downs because of increased, hurricane threat. All of those things are, especially the energy efficiency components are what's called part of the stretch building code. And, in my mind, this is exactly the same thing. Once these systems are, generally approved, in other words, once there's no question about DEP accepting them or having any concerns, it seems to me that it would make sense to require them. And one of the equity things around that is that you've just privatized your, your septic treatment by requiring the most advanced technology. And so instead of building a big municipal treatment complex around, sewage treatment, you're privatizing a big portion of it, and you're doing it in a very efficient way because there's no municipal staff involved. There's no the cost is a private cost between the homeowner and their contractor. There's a lot of nice elements to that in terms of being very efficient and cost effective socially, in addition to what it does for nitrogen reduction. So I don't know if that kind of makes sense, if there's any need or reason or desire to include that kind of thought. And maybe it's probably premature because the systems aren't generally approved, but anyway, that was something that Scott and I kicked around a little bit. I don't know how committee members feel about it.
I think once they have general approval, there won't be incentives. It'll just be, that's what you have to do. And so the incentive to do it now is that you get paid a portion of the cost. The incentive to do it later is it's the law.
What's the timeline? The way I understand it, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, is that, Title V has been sued. Title V is under a microscope right now, basically saying in this sandy soil down here on Cape Cod, it don't do it. I don't know if it's true the rest of the soils of the Commonwealth, but so now you're sitting there going, what's the timeline on Title V being, the dial gets turned up. It's a stretch goal where you basically say, okay, from now on, Title V includes a bunch, includes wood chips in the wood chip bin. I mean, wood chip box in between, the leach field and and fans going on. I mean, is that something that you see coming down the line in like, or is it geologic line, like, maybe in 100?
No. Fred, I can give you a quick update on that. I am serving on DEP's Title V Advisory Committee right now. And I'll tell you, there has been a long hiatus since our last meeting. And what they're talking about is exactly what you're talking about. Are they going to change Title V requirements in so-called nitrogen sensitive areas? I think it's going to be a while before they, require them in all embayment areas. They're looking to tie it to only certain ones. The other part of your question is, when can these systems get to general approval? And for the nitro system, one of the technologies we're looking at as of last week, I think there are 24 in the ground now, because 6 went into Barnstable last week. And there's another 8 going over the next, let's say, month or two. We need to get to 50. So hope is that some of this money that got appropriated in Wellfleet might result in, I don't know how many more of that particular system, but maybe another 8 or 10. And what's going on in other towns, once we get to 50, then we need 3 years of performance data. Now, we've got 3 years on many of the systems, so there's an ongoing discussion whether or not DEP will consider that as part of the 3-year period. But having said all that, I think a conservative estimate is the first 5-year period in the plan. And that's kind of why I put it in like that. I think you're absolutely right. During the first phase, there's going to have to be incentives or payment to get these systems in, because I don't think you can require homeowners. I mean, I think you could if you wanted to, but I think it would be hard to do that at this point where it doesn't have the general approval. But every indication is they'll get it, but it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of get, I know how slow government can move, Thing is, like,
Richard, were you trying to say something?
No, I was just going to say that you couldn't, I don't think you could require homeowners to use a system that hadn't been approved.
No, I get that, but my thing is that, like, if you read the writing on the wall, it's basically, okay, and as Scott just, said, these INA systems are going to be part of Title V, I mean, or it's going to be required in some abatement areas, as part of, like, new construction, Title V, and when that happens, it would be, nice to know, because we could say, okay, this is when, this is when the incentives will, sunset. You no longer need to have incentives, because now if somebody doesn't have enough money to put in one of these abatement Title V systems, nitrogen sensitive Title V systems, then the state would have to kind of cough up some kind of assistance. It wouldn't be up to us as much.
John, you were trying to say something?
Yeah, I think some of this is going to be driven at the state level, but some of it's also going to be driven at the local level. COMSCOM and the health department are both looking at this, and COMSCOM's limited to 300, well, right now 200, maybe 300 feet to the wetlands. Board of Health, they have more leeway. They may very well come down to requiring enhanced systems if you build remodeling of your home or sale of a home, or you have a failed system. So I think it's coming down the line, that requirement. And I think what we're interested in with the incentives is move people. I think your example of the
Stretch code.
Yeah, stretch code is a perfect example of that. The whole purpose is to incentivize people to move faster to what they're going to have to do anyway. And I would think in 10 years, some sort of enhanced system is going to be required, certainly within, for any new system in conservation, and probably Board of Health. And at that point, you don't need an incentive. People have to do it. That's just the way it is. I like to push people to do it early, and that's why I think we got the incentive there, because that's going to help us in the short run. But in the long run, this is going to be the law. So I'm not.
You realize how much that reduces the cost to the town for compliance.
Well, one of the other things that really struck me in crunching all the numbers and looking at things, and I showed the bar graph at the last select board meeting. If the town does not start installing these systems, it's pretty obvious we can see where the nitrogen load is going, and it's going up steeply. And as I think a couple of people have said many times, it's the analogy is digging the hole deeper, right? And at some point, you're either going to need to sewer those areas or take those Title V's out that you just put in and putting something better, one or the other. And again, my sense is that other than maybe the downtown area and some small pockets, I don't really see sewering as a economically feasible technology. I think we'll learn more of that from GHD. And I didn't put it in the report because I haven't done that work, but I'm based upon what I see in other towns in terms of costs. It just doesn't look feasible to do the whole town. So,
did I not see? I'm sorry, Scott.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I said, did I not see like a cost per hookup, for different kinds of systems, and like the cost
I did include the
House.
costs. I did include the costs on the INAs, but I did not put in the sewering costs in the report. Because as I said, I think I put a statement in the GHD is working on this. I don't want to step in right before them because they're going to do a more detailed analysis. I've been looking very carefully at what other towns are paying for sewers, and
Yeah,
I know what the range is. I don't know what the number is going to be for Wellfleet because it is pretty site specific. And generally speaking, density is the big driver. If you have high density, maybe it's $50,000 or $60,000 per property. If you have lower density, it's probably closer to 90 or 100. Those are my estimates based upon what I'm seeing going on in Orleans, Barnstable, and Mashpee and Falmouth. So those are significant numbers. And
We actually, Scott, not to interrupt you, but we actually
Yeah.
we do have a direct number in Wellfleet right now. And this occurred to me the other week. But in the Bowler report, they basically estimated about 2.5 million to add the neighborhood. And that was 30 homes to the 95 Lawrence collection and treatment system. And so that number is 83,000 per connection.
well, that's a little bit of a unique situation, and you got to watch out with the connections because it is a high density project.
No, that's what I mean.
affordable
So what I'm saying is
housing
that's the
part.
Wellfleet number, and that's one where there's density.
Yeah,
We start doing the
I
rest
don't know
of
what the
town.
number is per unit there, but that one's a little bit unique because of the density, and that is a pretty
Yeah.
good place to do that kind of thing. But I don't think you're going to see that in too many areas in the town.
No,
We
but
have
that's
a
what I'm saying.
range
That's
that- we have a
80 that's
range.
83. The best case scenario in Wellfleet right now is 83,000 a connection. It's only going to get worse. So your
but
numbers
even,
from other towns, I think, Scott, I'm just saying that your numbers, this number falls within the sanity check of your other numbers.
yeah, I mean, but it also just like you just said, the range, even the low end of the range is $40,000 more than, or $30,000 more per house, than an INA system.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Kurt,
Fine.
can I just say that I think we should move where we have agreement. I don't think there's any disagreement about the fact that the enhanced NI system in the outside of the high density areas is what we need to be pushing now and moving forward as quickly as possible. I think that's what I like about what Scott's done is he's sort of said, look, there's a possibility of reasonably cost-efficient alternatives in the downtown area to the IA system. But if we move out of the high-density areas, we really don't have a cost-effective alternative.
I don't think so.
Let's focus on what we can move forward on as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Like the way the report was done, you've sort of said, okay, we don't know about the downtown, which is somewhat unique.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right,
We don't
John.
want to sewer South Wellfleet. I mean, that's insane. So what can we do? Because we got to clean up what's going into the wetlands down there.
Yeah. And the other part of that I kind of like the PRB location that we're talking about, which is downtown. It would be interesting to evaluate that from a cost effectiveness basis. Even if you do the downtown sewering, that's going to give you much quicker results. And some of these PRB approaches have a lifespan of 10 or 20 years, like the injection wells. So you
Right.
could do one round of injection, get some water quality cleanup for the next 10 years, because if you sewer downtown, it's going to take at least 10 years for those results to show up. So they kind of go nicely together. But John, I think you said it better than I have. And I think that's what you just shared is exactly my vision. And I think let's hold off and see what happens downtown, but the rest of the town, it's fairly clear, I think, what the best options are. At least that's my opinion.
I share that opinion.
Thank you. Good to know. It's
What
nice to hear that.
And the beautiful thing would be to have Wellfleet participating in to get these things over the finish line. Get the number of systems that we need to get general approval. That's my biggest issue, and that, any septic system that's coming, any requests that are coming in, that they not be Title V, which is what, John, I think you've done a great job of really pushing the CONSCOM to in that direction as well. So I
Well, I
had.
know Janet has worked on the Board of Health in the same direction, so I think those two bodies, I think, are in sync with this.
Janet, did you have anything you wanted to share, or comments, questions? I see you're on muted. I don't know if you're listening or.
I'm listening and building a structure with my daughter here. I submitted comments to Scott.
Yes, you
and
did.
he's
Thank you, Hillary.
Incorporated them into the report already, so I don't need to detail them, I don't think.
No, thank you very
No,
much.
no,
I
I
appreciate it.
was actually wanting to see if Janet had any comments.
Oh,
No,
Sorry,
I'm
Hillary, I didn't mean to pull you from your ice cream party.
no, now I'm building structures with magnetiles. It's very, it's very engaging.
Can we play?
We want you to
Please
turn
come,
we want to
take my
turn your
spot.
video on, Hillary.
and I'm multitasking with a 4-month-old golden retriever. So, but I read the whole plan, Scott, and I just have to tell you, it was just really excellent, even for
Oh,
someone who's
Janet, thank you.
been exposed to it. I liked your narrative. It just really helped me out. So anyway, I will
readable.
have questions. I just need to digest them. But John Kumbler is absolutely right. There's a very nice goal within the Board of Health to make this whole situation a lot better. And it's certainly in the nitrogen mitigations area. So, but we have to be as well informed as we can, because we're as I said at another meeting, we're going to be the first ones that really have to sell this right to that homeowner who writes the check. So we've got to do it well and with all the scientific information and background that we need. So thank you so much, all of you. And Fred, I agree with you. I think the only comment I would have to right now is that I think it might be a very enhancing selling point to somehow state how your committee plans to evaluate the plan as you go on through the 5 years. So what indicators you're going to be looking for, where you're going to measure them, so that there's a faith in the plan, that it's not just written for the purpose of getting approval, but it's really written to help our situation with wastewater, and that you're going to take the responsibility of evaluating how well things are going.
I think that's an excellent point, Janet. And Scott, Fred had kind of alluded to it, and I think Richard did as well. But
yeah, and Fred brought it up. I just, as far as selling it, it just gives the plan credibility. Obviously you all have got the knowledge to really believe in this entire plan, and that's evident. You hear that in you. But John Q. Public hasn't done that yet. So they need to know that you're taking the responsibility to say, oops, look at this. We really did this well. It's better than we thought. Or oops, we're going to relook at this a little bit in 3 months or whatever, So just indications that you're going to be evaluating it along the 5 years.
yeah, and I think what Scott, where that could be incorporated in the report is to more carefully or more fully, I guess, explain adaptive management.
Yes.
Because it's just mentioned there. And I think what everybody's saying is it's not clear how that works or what it exactly means. Because
even if you understand adaptive management, you want to say, how does that apply to your plan? You see, to our plan.
Exactly.
And when is it going to be done?
Yep.
And share that.
I can add that. Yep.
That will infuse belief in the plan.
Okay.
There's
Good
also
comment.
another element there, Janet, and that is like I think the committee kind of, our charge is done when this document finally gets approved by the Board of Selectmen, because we will have completed our charge. If the Board of Selectmen want to extend or expand or change or modify the Clean Water Advisory Committee's role, they certainly can do that. We, by our current definition, we're done when we've got a watershed plan. In terms of administration of the plan going forward, I think what's built into the plan right now is an expectation that administrative resources will be brought to bear, i.e., a water supervisor, a wastewater supervisor that, Jay has been considering putting into DPW. So there are some other elements there in terms of how does this get administered, which is your question, Janet, and who's going to make those decisions. And I think you're right. That needs to be further fleshed out here. It's not clear in the current document.
Mhm.
Can I ask a
John?
question, Kurt?
Sure, go ahead, John.
And maybe Scott can answer, but I understand that the state is going to be continually, looking over our shoulder this whole time.
Yes.
They're going to be looking at our numbers. If we
Yeah.
don't satisfy the state, there's the accountability.
That's right.
Satisfy them.
Yep. Yeah, the way the Pleasant Bay permit is written is they spell out for each one of the so-called strategies, and they have INA septics in there, they have sewer, they have shellfish. There's a specific parameter, like the shellfish is landings, and the IAs are actual water quality data. And what it says is every 5 years, the towns have to meet with DEP, go over the data, and agree on compliance. And if they're meeting it, great. If they're not, then they need to do more. And that's kind of the schedule. So we'll spell that out. And I'm planning to write it, again, very much along the Pleasant Bay line, because that's the only thing we have to go on. But you're right, John, this is going to be, actually, the permit is 20 years, by the way. The plan is 30 years, I'm writing, but DEP will issue the permit for 20 years, and then they'll renew it. That's the way they work. But each 5 years, you're right, it's the town and DEP are going to have to get together and go over everything and see where they're at.
The other thing, one thing you said there though, is that once you have a plan in place and DEP is bought off on it, typically, in my experience with these kinds of plans, renewal isn't exactly a rubber stamp, but is near a rubber stamp. Because you've been
in this case, it's conditional approval. You'll hear them say that. It's like, yes, we'll approve the plan, but you have to show us the data that it's working.
Yeah, I know exactly. But you're adjusting the plan as you do it. So by the time you get to 20 years, it should be all in line. We're doing this with them, not doing it without them. So in 20 years, if they say, well, your plan sucks, we're pulling the permit. I'm like going, you've been with us all along. The other thing I find about DEP, which I was really surprised how risk averse they were. I mean, these systems, these wood chip systems. I mean, this is chemistry. This is science. They're like worried that this is just data, and these things seem to work really well. I mean, what are they gonna? They explode after 6 years or something, or 10 years. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, there's a guy the first guy that started doing this is in Waterloo, Canada. He's Robertson is his name. He's been building and running these things for 20 years. So it's new to us here in Massachusetts, but there's a lot of research on this, and it's pretty solid. Yeah.
And that's why I was really surprised how they would keep on saying, well, there is a risk. And I'm going, what's the risk?
I honestly think the risk that they see is that the original, and Hillary can speak to this, let's call them the older INA systems that had a lot of pumps and whistles and whatnot. People were unplugging them. Each homeowner was responsible with their own contractor. There was no so-called RME, no coordinator. So there have been a lot of issues. And I think DEP looked at that and said, that's just not manageable. But that's not what we're proposing here. And we're proposing newer technology, and we're proposing a very, coordinated management structure through this so-called RME. And I think it's a new approach. But I think that may be where some of their skepticism comes from, Fred.
Despite the fact that it's building on experience. Janet, that discussion around sort of accountability and who's going to do what to whom, do you have any thoughts as to whether that makes any sense to you?
Well, I was not aware that your charge was going to be finished and the select board would then make the decision. I just, as a citizen, I would want to see the people with the most expertise and the people who know the situation the best to be the ones evaluating it and tweaking it if it needs to be tweaked, you know. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want, I don't know, you know, but that's, I'll have to think about that one, Kurt.
Okay. Yeah,
But
no,
let's just remember, we have limited expertise in this town, you know, to take something over and do it effectively. So I think we'd have to really look at that, and we'd have to, you know, your group would have to help the select board to really do this in an intelligent way.
Hey, Janet, can't we just add this to Hillary's workload?
I don't think so. I think she's gonna come on in a minute, and you're gonna hear.
She's gonna come on in a minute.
I just want to see if Hillary was still listening.
As great as your plan is, I think she's gonna come on and have something to say, so.
No, I think, Janet, that we are going to be able to build, there's consensus, there's very solid consensus, I think, within town administration at the moment to get this resourced. It isn't resourced. And, you know, I think that's definitely going to have to happen. Everybody sort of sees it. I mean, just for example, needing to run a wastewater treatment facility in 95 Lawrence is going to require administrative staff and oversight that doesn't currently exist.
Yes,
So,
yes.
You know,
And,
so
and
I think-
again, as John said, your dad is going to come from the state evaluating it. So, you know, it's not like, so that's going to be here. It's just that what are we going to do about it, and how do we get it effectively in place?
Yeah.
How do we move our town? How do we move our town? And listen
Well-
at the same time. So so again, I thank you so much, and I will continue on. And you continue on. Thank you, Scott.
We
Okay.
appreciate
Janet.
your support, Janet. And thanks for
I have
joining
to
the
go back
meeting
to Leo.
tonight.
I have to go back to Leo, okay?
Okay.
Okay,
So,
bye-bye.
so I'm just gonna switch over to my comments and try to be brief. I do feel, you know, obviously this is an excellent job. One of the comments I had was just making sure that for each of the 3 technologies where town meeting has already voted on something, that we have that in the text in the right places. You know, for the enhanced IA, for the permeable reactive barrier, and for the 95 Lawrence, that we have the, you know, the vote in the dollars
Okay.
in there correctly.
Okay.
It's a little bit, between the 2 iterations, it's kind of jumbled around in places.
Okay.
So
Yep,
if you
yep.
just kind of think about, maybe we put it in one place up front, maybe we put it with each of the sections to repeat it.
Okay.
It's, you know, you've kind of got a couple of things going on there, and
Okay.
repeating it, there's nothing wrong with just citing, you know, again, at town meeting, June 2021,
Yep.
you know, 250,000 at town meeting, you know, blah, 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 1.2, whatever it was, 1 million.
Yep. Yep.
The other thing is, and let me try to ask this. I think there's a lot of data around, especially the work that Anna Maria Frankic did, Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies, and a lot of the work in the Chesapeake Bay area. And I think you've had some reluctance to kind of include a lot of that data in here, or maybe not, but I really think the report would be enhanced, you know, by you know, some reference to the amount of work that's been done elsewhere, especially on oysters.
Mhm.
And then with regard to our own water quality data, you know, it's kind of,
Yep.
there's general
Yeah.
statement here. Yeah, the oysters do you know, they enhance water quality, but, you know, we had some pretty specific numbers that came from, you know, Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies. They are now the water quality gurus for the entire Barnstable County, doing all the data and testing. And Amy's the one that actually, you know, provided that data on what the oyster project actually did.
Okay.
You know, so that's very, very authoritative in my mind, data. And
Yep. I can add more to that.
really
Yep.
enhances. I kind of feel like we have a lot of local data that we really want to sort of, you know, we spent a fair amount of time and money collecting it, and we want to make sure we present it.
Kurt, one thing in general, I've been thinking about adding some appendices to the report, and we might want to put that whole report in that was done. because we can summarize it in the text of the report, but I think including the whole report might be useful too.
Sure.
People want to, get into the details of it. So that's an option. And I was thinking of that for other reports too. I'm trying to remember which ones, but I think that might be, I'm envisioning a number of appendices.
Okay. But that was sort of my main,
Okay.
main thing there was just, really emphasizing our own data. The other was a little thing, and I don't know if this is something that just kind of, got into the cracks there, but in the discussion about GHD's qualification of the transfer station site,
Yep.
you're referencing the 780,000 that they found that we can do 780,000 gallons per day there.
Yeah.
And that exactly matches what the build out number is, which is 780,000.
That's right.
And then we went back to GHD and asked, well, what would this really look like, based on what you found? And they came up with something that looked more like 1.2 million.
Oh, you mean in terms of the
there.
potential it could take?
Yes. And
Yeah.
I think it's important to state that because it's way more than what we would ever need at build out, which says this site is way overqualified to meet this need.
Yeah, I can add that. I mean, I think,
when
frankly, I
when
think the
it's
780 is too, but
No, I agree. But when it's 780
yeah,
and 780, I think to the casual reader, they might say, Jesus, well, what happens if that number is wrong?
yeah, okay.
What happens if the need is wrong?
Yep.
What if it's higher? This site
Okay.
won't handle the entire town's needs.
Okay.
So I think to the extent that there's a lot of extra capacity there, gets people very comfortable that kind of under almost any circumstance, we got more than enough capacity.
Okay.
And she did the work, so we might as well just, we might as well use it.
Yep.
Trying to see if I had any other major ones. Yeah, we do talk a little bit about the pilot project, the shellfish project. I think we need to do a little bit of enhancement there around the benefits to not harvesting oysters and include some of the nitrogen cycling benefits that, Lisa, what's her name now? I'm drawing a blank. Kellogg and those folks had done down in Chesapeake.
Yep.
They've got like 20 years worth of data there and research, and it's just excellent. And I think that people may end up reading this report, and to the extent that we aren't explaining why oysters are important, they're 10% of what we've got for, just as the report sits, they're 10% of our nitrogen reduction target. And my feeling is that they're going to end up, when you do the measurements, being much more, because what's in there, for numbers is, the matrix numbers, which is only, meats and shell. And this stuff points to, 2 to 10 times more from oysters being in the water. I also think it's important to talk about that because it reduces the threat risk to the shellfish industry. This has been a real hot button for them. The Lonnie's Pond thing is a real hot button for them. They look at that as being competition coming from a municipality. And I think we need to do a better job of making it clear that this committee isn't recommending competition with the oyster industry. I think this is the only way to do it, is to show the benefits from not harvesting oysters and get, eventually we've got to get an explicit acknowledgement from DEP that we can't, it's inappropriate for compliance or monitoring purposes to only talk about harvesting oysters. It's just, that's going to be a real issue with the oyster industry in Wellfleet. If that's the only way you get to count this stuff, that looks like the municipalities getting into competition with the industry.
Yeah, that's a tough one because we've been pushing that for, several years. And I agree with you on the science. We have presented that. DEP has stuck to their guns for now, for now, meaning for the next few years, I would guess, they're only going to give credit for the harvest.
Well, what they,
but-
I'm not sure. I've heard Brian say on a number of occasions, for the purposes of our plan today, and that's what we're talking about, the matrix numbers, which only look at the value from harvest
yeah.
or what are going to be used.
Right.
By the same token, he's also said it's your monitoring data that's going to count.
Yeah, right. That's what I was just going to say.
So we're going to get
Yeah.
credit for what happens, not
Yeah,
what theoretically
right.
somebody
That's
put
right.
on a piece of paper. So we're just, in this report, I just feel it's important to lay out the case. The data is there. We already have our own data from our own project. We never
Yeah.
harvested an oyster and saw a 70% reduction in nitrogen.
Yeah,
So, there's a benefit without harvesting an oyster. from our own
I
data.
agree. But I think
So-
the important point to get the town credit is what the last thing you said, and that is the water quality monitoring in the estuary is going to be, the bottom line. Once the quality is there and the habitat restores, the town, we're done. And frankly, DEP is not going to care whether it came from the oysters or the septics or, they obviously will care a little bit, but the point is, there are a number of things. I think the ecosystem restoration projects fall into the same category, Kurt.
They do.
I don't know how much herring, I don't think anybody knows how much Herring River will help. I took a little bit of a guess on Mayo Creek. I'm not sure those numbers are right either. It might be a lot better. But I think spending a lot of effort now on Mayo Creek or Herring River, I think it's better to get the monitoring in place, do the projects, and let it, as you said, that's how they're going to get convinced on those things.
Yeah,
So-
let the results speak for themselves.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I'm just sensitive to the political aspects of the oyster folks looking at us as competing with them. We really have to be careful about that.
Yeah. I hear
I
you.
think
We've had some good meetings with the Shellfish Advisory Board, and as you know, we've backed off significantly on making the shellfish, a major part of the plan, because I think they were nervous about that. And I think where it's at now is, I talked to Nancy again the other day, and we're going to continue to talk with the Shellfish Advisory Board, but I think they're pretty comfortable with what we're proposing from my meetings with them. I think but I agree with you. We can add more to the report on this discussion. Absolutely. But I think we're in a pretty good place with the Shellfish Advisory Board, if that's the right group in town.
Well, it is, but it's also the fishermen.
Okay.
They have, and there's another group. There's the Wellfleet Shell Fishermen's Association. That's a wilder bunch, and they're the ones who have been very concerned about this issue. We have not really talked to them or addressed them. And so anyway,
Well,
there is a sensitivity there that I think we need to make sure we deal with. I don't think, going back to Fred's earlier comment, I have one in here about, I won't bring it up. It's too controversial. It has to do with the ADU. I don't think, if you get 90% reduction or 95 from an advanced septic and you go down to 85 by adding a bedroom, I think that's still a winner. But anyway, and the last thing is just for your knowledge, Scott, I do have the votes. You were looking for a table.
Oh, good. That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I have all the votes.
That would be a good appendix as well, I think.
And the last kind of comment is in the section where you're talking about the scenarios around 11% or 11 milligrams, 8 milligrams, and 5 milligrams.
Yep.
I think it's important to make clear that meeting the MEP targets for that 5, 8, and 11, those scenarios, it assumes that the other programs are reaching their goals as well. It's not just this enhanced IA program that achieves that target. I mean, it's these scenarios on top of, PRB, on top of 95 Lawrence, on top of, the oysters, on top of the other stuff. So that we make it really clear, these things are interdependent, they're linked. If you don't do one of them, you got to make it up someplace.
Yeah, I think I did say that, but I think I can say it more clearly. And I think that's a question we're going to get from DEP. I think they may even want to see how many, how much can we do this with INAs alone? They may ask us that question. Everything else fails. That they might want to be that conservative. And we could go there, but I hesitate to go there because I don't think that's reasonable, but they may push us there. We'll see.
You do well. I haven't gotten that impression. I mean, I think they'll, if you're using matrix numbers, I know Brian's going to try to push back, just to put a, I probably shouldn't say that publicly, but one person may push back, but they can't deny something that's been approved by the governor as being a reasonable planning number. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this is
I think
you're using is approved.
I think your earlier point's the important one, and that is we got to make it clear this plan is predicated on multiple, strategies simultaneously. And I frankly think that's a good thing. And I frankly think that makes it less risky. I always use, as you know, I use the example of the diversified financial portfolio as an example of that, which I think is a good example.
Yeah, no, it's perfect.
So, yeah, but I'll clarify that in the report because that's right. It needs to be clear that this plan is based on all of these technologies, and I'm trying to be conservative in each case in terms of performance. I don't want to stick my neck out too far. I'm using, the technology matrix performance numbers. The shellfish industry, I'm using their existing growth rate, nothing new. So trying to be conservative.
And you do, and in terms of the matrix, I mean, I thought you did a great job of laying out the foundation behind those numbers. They're authoritatively researched. Those were reviewed by, all of those people that you mentioned. The only thing you didn't mention was the technical advisory committee,
Right.
the scientific technical advisory committee that was also part of the review process.
Yep.
And
I can add that.
that was one the Cape Cod Commission had, and then the Cape Cod Water Protection Collaborative also had a technical advisory committee reviewing those numbers as well. So, there were a lot of scientists, a lot of industry experts, a lot of people looking at those numbers. They're not just, pulled out from thin air someplace. So that's why they are approved, and that's why I don't think DEP can disapprove or not allow or, somehow prohibit us from using technology in the matrix and assuming that it's going to get the numbers that are in the matrix.
Kurt,
John.
yeah, I want to go back to Scott's point about the sort of all these interconnected systems, and it's also important that you be explicit that there's redundancy built into this, because the disadvantage of multiple systems and being dependent on is if one fails, then we fail. So I think focusing on the fact is the multiple systems give us a redundancy. It's important that we don't run for efficiency here, because efficiency can get you in trouble if something fails. Using the parallel in today's world, just-in-time manufacturing worked great. It didn't. So I just think we're building redundancy into the system. Let's let people know.
I like that.
We can
I
have
like that.
all the shellfish fail on us,
Right.
and we're still cool.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, we
I
can
think
have a
that's right.
component. That's right. That's exactly
Okay, I'm
right.
going to use that word redundancy, John. I think that makes a lot of sense.
The other
Thank
thing
you.
I was wondering too, Scott, is if there, I don't think this, I'll just ask it. I don't think it's the answers that we can do it, but it seems to me that you did use extremely conservative, assumptions. You've been very, you and I have had a lot of discussions about the conservatism that's built in here. If you don't use conservative assumptions and you assume something that's more middling, not a high end, but, just some sort of, again, sensitivity on, where is there some upside in certain areas here? That potentially produces an excess amount of nitrogen removal capacity, sort of along the lines of what John's is saying, we got a lot of redundancy here. I think we also have a lot of extra capacity. And if we can somehow point to where some of that might be, redundancy and a little bit of extra excess capacity, I think are two ideas that would be very helpful for DEP.
Yeah, I mean, I think one example of that is the Herring River project, huge project. It's, I think most of us would agree it's going to have some water quality benefits. I'm not counting on anything there. So that's one example. I think that's a real, I like both of those ideas, redundancy and the extra capacity. If you look through that matrix I put together for the 30 years, you'll see there's a bunch of them that have, or for example, another one is more cluster systems. I got 95 Lawrence in there, but there could easily be in the next 30 years, a few more projects like that. But we're not counting on them, but certainly could happen. So there's I think I'll try to highlight those, Kurt. That's a good
just
idea.
lay out upside. If you can lay out upside,
Yep.
I think that's going to be very helpful.
Okay. I like that.
Anybody have anything else? Fred? Richard?
Nope.
Janet? John?
Kurt, one just quick question for me. We can't answer it tonight, but I got all these comments and I'm going to make some changes, and I want to be careful about version control in this report. And, so it's we should think about, and again, not necessarily tonight, but we're going to have the select board meeting on November 2nd, which is coming up in about 12 days. We should, I guess I'll want to get some thoughts from you people on when we might want to do another version of the report. I don't think we want to do too many.
No.
Because that's going to get confusing. In fact, it's already been confusing. There's a lot of moving parts here. So I don't know if I have any quick thoughts on that tonight, but something we should revisit maybe before the select board meeting or at the select board meeting. I'm not sure. I mean, I can keep the notes and run my own, suggested edits, but not submit another report. I mean, this one's only got 24-hour shelf life so far, so probably too early to think about.
Yeah, I think you'll drive yourself nuts if you start doing a bunch of iterations. And what we ought to do is at least wait for the select board comments.
Okay.
I think once we have those, in that meeting, I think you're exactly right. Go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, I mean, I just put deadlines on things. Say, okay, I'd like to, provide, the select board with a revised draft, 4 or 5 days before their meeting, your comments by this date so I can, collect them all and update the plan. And then I'll give you a draft plan, a November 2nd draft plan or whatever it is you want to call it, 5 days before so you guys can digest it. That would be my only comment on that one. Put deadlines on things. Otherwise people will just, show up at you said like noon on Monday because you wanted comments, and that's why I did them on Sunday. Okay, well, that's probably get a crush in to get him, if I give them to him at noon on Monday. But
Well, the other option would be I could put together. I'm just thinking there might be some of these comments are relatively small. Some of them are bigger. I could put together, 2 or 3 updates for the select board that I could actually just present to them that night. Just say, you've had the report, you read it. Yes, it's a draft report. It's going to get edited, but here's a few new thoughts that have come up between the time I provided the report and the meeting. So that could be done. I think I could do that more verbally, if you will, in a presentation. I'm just nervous about giving too many versions out there. That's all.
Yeah, I think, Scott, I just, I think they're gonna have questions. And I would just let it flow naturally. And just
Okay.
because if the question is something about something that we've already discussed, you can say, yeah, we did discuss that at
Yeah.
our, Clean Water Advisory meeting. And here's what we're thinking. How does that sound to you?
Yep. I think that's good.
Kurt, if I could just, before I hit the
Fire
sec-
away.
Okay, just to piggyback on what Scott had to say, and Fred, I think we have to keep in mind how big the circulation list was. So yes, giving a revised copy to the select board will help the select board, but it's the public and the people that we're really trying to sell this to, who would feel, maybe their noses would be a bit out of joint. You know what I'm saying? I think when you do a revision, and if you thought it was important enough to send it to that group of people, those are the folks that have to get the revision also.
I agree.
Because they'll be sitting there with their report and trying to figure out where the changes happen. I like the idea of a list of revisions, because that says this is what the committee has looked at, and we're looking for you to make some revisions before we get another copy out. So,
Yeah. I
and
was
then
almost thinking,
that invites the public a little bit more to get
I-
involved in the product.
yeah, that was exactly my angst. I was having a lot of angst about that too. I think we don't want to do the next revision should be after we get all these comments, and we would either have another select board meeting or a forum meeting. We do have a forum meeting coming up with regard to the the enhanced IA program, which I think is going to be great. But then the next thing should be, like basically a public hearing on sort of a final draft.
Yeah.
Which would be again, Jen, I don't know if that's enough, but we gotta, it's really the public. You're right. You're exactly right that we need to sell this to.
Right. And I mean, I think if everybody on your initial mailing list was thought to be important enough to get a copy of the original plan, they're important enough to have a copy of the revision when it's going to be discussed at a select board meeting or
Amen.
at a public forum, and of course,
Yeah.
the public forum would be the best.
Amen. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. I'm
agree.
going to bed. Bye. Good night.
That's going to make your life easier, Scott.
Yep. I
Bye.
think that makes more sense.
Yeah. And we want to make Scott's life easier. Good night. Bye.
Thank you, Janet. Anybody else?
I'm gonna just say goodbye.
Somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I will second it because there's only four of us, I guess.
John, your vote? Fred? Richard?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you very much, Scott, and thank
You guys for your
all
time. I
very much.
appreciate it.
Keep in
Good
mind, Scott,
really good
Thank you.
comments. Really good
Keep in mind, this
comments.
is recorded, so you have all this, Scott. You'll
I do.
have this
Okay.
to be able to reference as well.
Thank
Good
you,
night,
Fred.
everyone.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Richard. Thank you,
Take care.
Hillary.